Hi, I'm Evan with Movie Sauce, and my phone just went off. Hi, I'm Evan with Movie Sauce, and this is yet another look at the Rokinon Cine DS lenses. I guess it's like a part 3. So now I've got a pretty complete kit, and I've had a little more experience with the lenses, going on about 4 months of shooting all of our commercial work with these lenses, and I've been very happy with the results and kind of wanted to dive in a little more into the usability and kind of the experience I've had using these lenses over a more extended period of time. In my opinion, I think lenses tend to be kind of a subjective thing. Every lens has a little slightly different look to it. I'm tempted to say no lens is perfect. Obviously, if you spend, 10 grand on one lens, it's going to be a pretty damn good lens. But for most people, the differences in various lenses are very subtle and not noticeable to the average end user. So when I judge lenses, it's largely has to do with the usability and the form factor and the functionality. How easy are they to carry around? Are they light? Are they small? Every project you use, you don't necessarily need the best of everything. You don't need the biggest of everything. Generally, the more expensive the lens and the nicer the lens, the larger and heavier it is. If you're doing documentary work or some kind of run and gun commercial work, or popping in a place, picking off some shots and getting out, you're not necessarily going to be sitting there setting up giant lights, big matte box, giant cinema lens, follow focus, focus puller, all these sort of, perfect environment sort of features that you would do, if you're absolutely trying to get the best absolute image possible. But often many scenarios don't call for that. And that's kind of where I come with the Rokinon Cine DS lenses. Is they are small, they're light, they're very usable, they're portable. Another reason I like them so much over, say, the Sigma Art series or some other DSLR lenses that are nicer and more expensive but aren't quite cinema lenses, is the manual apertures. For me, that's a really big selling point. I think a lot of people tend to overlook that. Being able to change the aperture the same way you change the focus with just a ring on the camera allows you to work a lot faster. It's a really convenient feature to me. Allows me to keep my hand on the lens at all times rather than going back and forth between the monitor, or if you're using a camera with a body where you have the buttons to switch, then you have to go back and forth with that. It kind of depends on the form factor of the camera you're using, I guess. But for me, it's really nice to have like one hand on the lens at all times and being controlling focus and aperture with that hand. All right, and just for kind of a proper comparison here, I'm going to show each lens, the 14, 24, 35, 50, 85, and 135 at similar apertures. Not all the lenses are equally fast. So for this first round, I'll have each lens open as wide as it goes. That does not mean they're all the exact same aperture. Another thing to note is I am shooting on the Red Dragon sensor, which has 16.5 stops of dynamic range. That's more than most other cameras. It does give an effect that there is a filter on the lens. To kind of an untrained eye, it may look like there's a ND filter or a polarizer because you're able to get more of the sky highlights and the shadows in the same shot. If you're not shooting on a red or something with high dynamic range, you will have a more contrasty image than I do right now. This is the 35mm at t1.5. Shutter speed's also at 1/1200th of a second. Also, the sun is going it's a little bit of a cloudy day. Sun's kind of moving in and out of clouds, so there may be some variation in that effect. It is not the lenses, it's just sun changing. What I should say is the only two lenses that vary on the aperture are the 14mm and the 135, basically on the two extremes of the kit. All the lenses in the middle, basically the 24, the 35, the 50, and the 85, all go to t1.5. Another thing that happens, if it's not obvious, as you get closer and more what's called telephoto, it increases your depth of field. So what happens is the longer lenses like the 85, sorry, there's a bee flying around my head. So the longer lenses like the 85mm and the 135 tend to get the impression that they're sharper. That's generally just because it creates more of a separation. So the background now is very blurry where I'm very sharp. And so the edges are sharp because of that distinction around me. So the naked eye looking at this image is probably gonna say, oh, that's the sharpest lens in the kit. That's not entirely true. It just has to do with how the depth of field works. This is the 135mm lens at t5.6, which is a very kind of common right in the middle aperture. And this is the 85mm at t5.6. Again, the shutter speed has not changed. And this is the 50mm at t5.6. And this is the 35mm at t5.6. And now we got the sun coming back out again, creating slight inconsistency. And this is the 24mm at t5.6, and I'm probably blowing out a little bit of the highlights. What's happening is as we go wider, we're seeing more of the sky, more of the ground that the sun's hitting on. And I'm trying to keep the shutter speed consistent for the sake of demonstration. And now we're going behind a cloud, so no problem. And finally, we have the 14mm at t5.6. This is the 14mm set at t22. In other words, it's closed all the way down. So as dark as the lens gets, I've had to compensate by bumping up the ISO to 1600. Shutter speed is still at 1/48 of a second. Here we have the 24mm at t22, and the sun just popped out from behind a cloud. This is as dark as the lens goes. I've still got the ISO at 1600 for consistency's sake. This is the 35mm at t22, or stopped all the way down, everything in focus. And this is the 50mm at t22. This is the 85mm at t22. You should be able to start getting a sense of the difference in the depth of field versus the first round of tests when it was wide open. Now you can see everything behind me. It's not as much of a dramatic separation. And finally, this is the 135 stopped all the way down to t22. You should be able to see everything behind me. Quite a distinct difference from the wide open shot where there's a nice sharp line with shallow depth of field. This here is the 135. I'm trying to get a shot where you can kind of see the bokeh of the lens. What the bokeh is that little circular formations you see in the leaves in the back. It's a pretty nice bokeh effect. Again, bokeh is really a subjective thing. If you like the shape of those little circles in the background, those shapes can vary depending on the lens, so it's kind of a minute issue if you ask me. This is close as it focuses. There's my hand. Very sharp. Get that bokeh. Middle ground. All the way to the back. And to infinity. But I kind of like the mechanical nature of being able to kind of play around. This is all mechanical control I'm doing here. It's like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then maybe open it up, maybe close it down. You know, rather than having to think like a calculator, these mechanical manual lenses kind of give you the option to play around and find what you're looking for. It's just more, what's the word? Tactile, I guess, rather than digital. It's not an idea of having to understand menus and what numbers and words mean. It's a physical turn that creates the effect. I like that. For me, it makes it more intuitive. The only real downside to the mechanical aperture is that you can accidentally slide it. It's a small lens. Those gears are kind of, if you're doing a lot of handheld, the gears are right there. It's not that hard if you're going to focus or something that, you know, another finger or your wrist or, you know, part of your palm could graze the aperture ring and push it a little one way or the other. But the nice thing is, even when that's happened on stuff that I've shot, it doesn't seem jarring in the video, but there's something about the soft transition and kind of the subtleness of it that it's not really that noticeable. You know, if you're on your DSLR and you're clicking from, you know, f2.8 to f5.6, you're gonna see these hard changes where it gets darker and darker. And when it's just a smooth, like subtle thing, it almost is negligible. You almost don't really notice it. For me, it's all about usability and functionality, ease of use. They look good, and they're a very cheap way to get a lot of lenses to cover your entire range, and they're full manual. I like that. So again, thanks for watching. If you have any more detailed questions, anything else I can answer, I will try my best to answer them in the comments. And please subscribe to our channel. Thanks.